Today's webinar, How to Leverage Your Existing HP ALM Investment for Fully Automated and Integrated Mobile Testing. My name is Stephanie Concoy, and I'm the Global Chapter Liaison for Vivid. Next slide. Today's webinar is brought to you by the Vivid Mobile Special Interest Group led by Todd DeCapua. Please make sure to visit the Mobile Special Interest Group page on the Vivid website and click on the Join Group to join the Special Interest Group today. Next slide. Our presenters today are Todd DeCapua, Vice President of Channel Operations and Services at Shenra, John Jeremiah, Senior Product Marketing Manager of Performance Center Mobile at HP, and Giddy Pritter, Director of Marketing at Perfectile Mobile. Next slide. Some housekeeping. Today's live session is being recorded and is intended for all Vivid members. The recording will be posted on Vivid's webinar section on the website, as well as the Mobile SIG homepage for all Vivid members. If you have questions as we go along, please make sure to type and send them in using the questions pane in the webinar control panel. Next slide. Here is a picture of the GoToWebinar control panel that usually appears in the upper right-hand corner of your screen. To submit a question, make sure the questions pane is expanded and type in your question and click on Send. So let's get started. I'll turn it over to John.
Thank you very much. I'm really happy to be here, and we're all happy to be here with you today to talk a little bit about mobile challenges and how to get the most out of your mobile efforts. And let's just sort of start with kind of an overview and a big picture and acknowledge what's changed in the last several years. It wasn't very long ago that mobile was something different. Can we go to the next slide? Mobile really used to mean having a mobile phone and a smartphone meant you could access things like email and your calendar and your contacts. You could keep up with your to-do list, and that was about it. But something has changed in the last 4 or 5 years. The idea of apps and smartphones has changed radically. Now, when we talk about mobile and mobile apps and smartphones and the capability on tablets, we're talking about the ability to really do business transactions, to conduct the core business on mobile devices. Not only the core business, but we're still doing productivity. We're doing all sorts of things on mobile devices that we never would have thought we could have done in the past. If I take my smartphone out now, I can use my smartphone to record my exercises. I can use it to record my heart rate. I can use it to check in when I go to a store, and I can use it to pay when I leave. These mobile devices are now entirely different and enormous greater capabilities than we've ever seen in the past. And so to test these, let's go on to the next slide. And as we think about testing mobile devices, and as we think about how do we ensure that we're developing and delivering a complete experience for our end users, we've got to think about two different sides of the coin. Functionality, to make sure that the application that we're designing will work, and when we deploy it, that it will work on our end users' devices. And from a functionality perspective, the world has become so much more complicated. If we look at the pace of implementations of new devices and new operating systems, to ensure functionality across the spectrum of different devices is so much more difficult than it ever was in the PC world. And then we have to concern ourselves with performance. Because in the old world, performance was, well, simpler. We didn't have the variability of the mobile network. We didn't have the limitations on the devices. Performance was a lot different. And we've got to really think about how the end-to-end experience can be evaluated as we're testing the application to ensure that we deliver the right application. And so let's go on and shift into some of the challenges and just some statistics, because I think it's important to just acknowledge how fast the world is changing. And we'll go to the next slide. I was at the Mobile World Congress event this year, and it was myself with 65,000 of my closest friends in the mobile industry. And we were there, and it was energy and the amount of change that's coming, the number of different devices. I made a video of it that shows hundreds of different Android devices with innovative technology and innovative form factors. It's all driving this mobile explosion. It's all driving the fact that people are using mobile devices now as their primary way to connect to the internet. There's a whole segment of the world that they don't use computers, they use a phone or some sort of a mobile device to connect to the internet. And this is driving businesses to start to approach mobile development and delivery as almost as a mobile-first approach, and then to think about how do they drive to web traffic as well. We can go on to the next slide. You know, and just some other statistics of looking at the query growth that Google has been seeing, or YouTube playbacks on mobile devices. It's all driving us towards this conclusion that mobile is something that every organization is going to have to deal with. I've often asked people, to think about companies that don't need a mobile strategy and that don't need to develop and deliver mobile applications. I know what they are, and I know who those companies are, and it's easy to describe them. The companies that don't need a mobile strategy are companies that don't have employees or don't have customers who are people. If they're working with people, either customers or employees or partners, then they're going to have an approach to mobile, either mobile websites or mobile applications, because that's where we're headed. So let's go ahead and take a quick poll and gather and get your feedback. We want to make this a little bit interactive. So in the poll right now, could you answer and give us a sense of how many Android variants were introduced last year? And I'm going to also hand it over to Giddy, who's going to go ahead and share some of his perspective and experience and thoughts around mobile and functional testing. Giddy?
Yes, I'm here. Can you hear me all right?
You're great.
Okay. So we'll just wait for the poll results to kick in, I guess. Well, we can see the results, and it looks like most people voted for greater than 200. A lot of people also voted for between 51 and 100, and the right answer is greater than 200. If you think about it, that's really an overwhelming number. Over 200 Androids only. If you take into consideration the total amount of new smartphones presented into the market, it's somewhere around 500, which is, I think, greater than any other technology trend that we've ever seen before. Can we move to the next slide? So my name is Giddy. I'm from Perfecto Mobile. For those of you who do not know us, Perfecto Mobile offers cloud-based, a platform called the Mobile Cloud. It's a cloud-based platform for mobile application testing and monitoring on real devices, handsets, and tablets. We integrate with a HP ALM in order to enable enterprise users, HP shops, to seamlessly extend their HP testing to mobile. I want to talk about, first of all, the key. We see a lot of, we have a lot of enterprise customers. We talk to them, and they all share the number one challenge, which is obviously the quality. How it's very hard to maintain and to obtain the necessary quality for mobile applications and services. But I think the second challenge would be how to start. How do I take on such a huge challenge? And this is why my friend Todd here, John, and myself would cover some of the best practices and considerations that should help you get started and build your planned architecture and strategy. What we see here is pretty interesting. This is a 6 years graph showing what happened in the web browser world. You see Internet Explorer, it used to have 90% of the market. That changed later. Over 6 years, 4 major versions were released by Microsoft. And naturally, they affected the product roadmap, release timeline, because certain modifications had to be made. You can continue clicking that, Todd. Thanks. Then you can add to the picture all the other ones. Firefox had gained momentum, and Safari, and Chrome, and you had to, they all intervened with your product release timeline. But that's 6 years. Now I want to compare that to only 1 year, last year actually, in mobile. And I think that that's really overwhelming for every development QA organization. This is a true reflection of Android only Android. In 1 year, 2011, 3 major versions. If you take version 3, that's the honeycomb, it opened a whole new vector for Android-based tablets, which complicates the story a lot more. If you click that, you'll see that all of these versions obviously affect your product releases, because you have to make modifications. Your users are actually buying these devices. But then add to that all the other operating systems and Windows Phone that suddenly came into play. And add to that all the other form factors, screen sizes, resolutions, smartphones, tablets. You get an impossible matrix with so many form factors to test that in order to really respond to this market, a quarterly or biannual release is simply not an option anymore. And a key consideration to take into account when you're planning your mobile quality strategy is how can your organization deliver continuous QA, meaning at least to some extent all the time. Let's move on. Another thing that's related, another point that's related to this one has to do with obviously a shorter development cycle as well. A lot of people say that mobile will be the death of the waterfall. The reason is that the market is moving so unbelievably fast that if you release a version of your product only once a quarter for that matter, then you accumulate too much risk. And in order to cope with an agile market, it's probably time to become more agile yourself. This is an article exemplifying some of the things we're talking about. Citibank, a small bank called Citibank, kidding of course, and some of you might have read that on the papers. They had this big error with their application. It had to do with double billing. If you look at the last paragraph, Citi has traced the error to its nascent iPad application, other mobile applications, and the bank's broader online bill payment system are immune from the problem. That's what the bank said. That's just a very good real-life example to how exceedingly important it is to actually test on the real devices, handsets, tablets that your users are using in order to really check the real user experience, functional and performance-wise. By the way, we can move on, Todd. By the way, a little supplement to John's introduction about the challenges. I think that what makes mobile very, very different from other technology trends that we've seen before is that the ones making the way are not the IT departments, but the users themselves buying these handsets, these smartphones, these tablets. And an enterprise facing customers simply can't decide to ignore it or postpone it because the users are already using these platforms, technologies in order to access this enterprise services. Let's move on. Todd?
Great, thanks, Giddy. So again, I mean, painting this whole history and story of just all of these devices, all of these different operating systems, again, it's very, very overwhelming. I think the other thing that's important to look at is probably, what is the impact that organizations are recognizing if they fail to do what Giddy and what John have been alluding to. So there's two quick quotes on here. The first one from the IT Management News, talking about a $42,000 per hour for each user group that's impacted as a result of productivity loss. So again, if you have people, either as customers or as employees, as John had referenced, again, this is saying that roughly $42,000 per hour for each user group impacted would be the results. The bottom one here from CA Technologies, again, looking at over 1,800 different companies, the loss associated with IT issues has been quantified as a 63% reduction in productivity, resulting in an average of 552 people hours lost per year per company. So again, fairly significant, and where organizations are thinking they're going to gain more productivity as a result of mobile devices and mobile applications. Again, we can see how this is also causing a reduction in productivity as well. The other thing that gets to be rather interesting is when you try to then calculate what the cost of a failed mobile application would be or a mobile website. The cost of finding and remediating problems is really only a single data point. When you look at that $42,000 per hour from the previous slide, some of the other considerations that we are seeing and hearing in the marketplace from customers and from prospects is, what is the impact of bad reviews? So again, now you've got things like the Apple Store, you've got things like the Android market, where almost instantly, not to mention social media, you can get bad reviews on your apps at literally real time as they come out. And, how about good reviews? How does that then impact the organization from a brand perspective, revenue, et cetera? Another question that comes to mind, what is the cost of losing a customer? Retaining this customer, having that lifetime customer value. Many banks and financial institutions call it wallet share. Again, looking into your wallet and seeing who are those financial organizations that you are a lifetime customer of, and having a poor experience on your mobile device, we've seen, will cause customers to move to other organizations. And then ultimately, how those performance degradations affect revenue. Again, there's a lot of studies in this area where looking at performance, you can see as performance goes down, also the revenue line goes down, and literally these are in revenue per minute for many online organizations. Also looking at productivity, again, we've seen the one quote previously that shared that there was a 63% reduction in productivity, and again, that was due to poor performing mobile applications. And then how many of these issues could have been avoided? Again, I'm highlighting performance here, but also, as Giddy was alluding to, thinking through the functional issues. And again, in the example that he used from the Wall Street Journal, again, a very relevant and important learning that I'm sure that organization had. So we mentioned looking at these reviews that come in, and we wanted to just show one real result. And again, this was from the Android market feedback, and we've gone ahead and kind of blacked out the big logo here to protect that organization. But what you'll see is, there's literally, just as we were going through and pulling out these reviews, you can see that, one customer, Anthony here, says, multi-billion-dollar company, and they can't seem to afford a couple of programmers to do a good app. Very sad. Again, one of the things that we've seen is 16% of customers that have poor mobile experiences, either functionally or performance, will move to another organization for their services or products as a result. So again, some pretty compelling information here. Next, we're going to get into some of the best practices, and Giddy, I'll hand it back over to you.
Okay, thank you, Todd. Okay, so we'll go over some best practices. Before that, I want to narrow it down to 3 key considerations that you should take into consideration when planning your mobile application lifecycle management process, moving from software application lifecycle management to software and mobile application lifecycle management. We talked about how the market is incredibly fragmented and extremely dynamic with all the different platforms and networks, form factors, and this is the first key consideration: sync platforms, sync networks. It's not the browser world anymore, testing on, Internet Explorer and Firefox. It's not it anymore. And planning your architecture, planning your best practices, you need to support a lot of platforms, a lot of networks in order to really reflect your users' experience that is very fragmented and changing all the time. Second, as I mentioned before already, shorter cycle, shorter development or QA cycle in order to accumulate less risk between your product versions. That means basically becoming more agile. Development organizations have to learn how to do that in this market. And last but not least, continuous QA. We also discussed that before. At least to some extent, deliver QA all the time in order to respond to the market. So let's move on to the next slide and start with the first best practice that we recommend to you. The first best practice has to do with automation. And, some companies practice automation. Some do only manual exploratory testing. When it comes to mobile, automation is a key building block, a pillar. It simply cannot be done well enough without automation. The reason is, actually there are various reasons. We see that with our customers all the time. First of all these test cases, suddenly the amount of test cases that your QA organization has to cover grows significantly. And manually, it would be virtually impossible to get to this level of coverage. Another thing is the fact that automation is a key enabler to nightly builds, to a more agile development cycle, and to this key ability to deliver QA on a continuous basis all the time by automating some of the basic tests. So you need to automate your mobile functional testing. A key consideration, thing to check, is the ability to reuse, and I'm going to repeat that because that's very important, to reuse tests to accelerate delivery and repeatability, meaning you have so many devices you cannot script your test case over and over and over and over again. That would simply be too time consuming. So it's a must ability to be able to script a logical, abstract test case and then easily replicate it across multiple devices, multiple platforms, multiple geographies. So one good test automation engineer can actually do the work of many. Emulators and multiple real devices. Real devices are imperative because you really want to test the real user experience, and in order to give the quality stamp, you need to make sure that it really works on the same device in a real network, like your end users. Emulators are also a very important touch to the process in order to provide a quicker, more convenient solution, mainly in early development stages, but an automation solution should cover both of them. And last, I'll jump to the last point, impact of variable mobile networks. I want to emphasize that, and my friends from Shunya are here on the line with me and can elaborate on that later. Networks are a key consideration when it comes to mainly when it comes to performance. It also has to do with functional, and this is another thing that you need to consider when you plan your test cases. Let's move to the next slide. So some key considerations for a better mobile test automation. There are a lot of approaches out there. To summarize, it enables continuous QA, shorter development cycle, increases your test coverage, and reduces the multi-platform risk. You need to make sure that it's reusable, that the platform, the solution that you choose, enables logical abstraction, as we said before, so you can easily replicate the test cases. Support objects, for example, set field. Include smart and low-level functions. This is the same approach taken by HP in QTP, or Unified Functional Testing for this matter. Keyword-based scripting that enables basic functions, and based on them, more complicated virtual functions that you can program for yourself. For example, log into the application, search for a specific page, make a transaction, log out. This is something that you need to make sure that you can program as swiftly and conveniently as possible. So to summarize this point, because we have many more, test automation is a key capability for a mobile testing organization. You have to have a robust system, device agnostic, meaning script on one device and replicate it across multiple devices, platforms, networks, without redoing the whole script all over again. And that's basically it. Let's move to the next best practice. I think that one is yours, Todd.
Great, thank you, Giddy. So as we move into best practice number 2, again, Giddy had mentioned that I am from Shunra. Shunra being the recognized authority in application performance engineering, and also an MRP program member at HP along with Perfecto Mobile. So as HP and John, we've crafted this message together. With the three of us, we all bring different pieces to the puzzle, which John had shown us, and we'll look at in a little bit more detail here later on. But best practice number 2 really picks up on some of the bits that Giddy had mentioned, one being the single user performance and also the impact of the variable mobile networks. So looking at your, maximizing automation to extend coverage, again, leveraging our integrated capabilities, you now have the ability to do a single user performance test while you're running your functional test and getting all of those results. Again, leveraging the HP, Perfecto Mobile, and Shunra combination of capabilities. As we look at this best practice, how do you discover your mobile network conditions? So again, within that, there's things like bandwidth, there's the latency or the delay that's built into that network, and then also packet loss. Again, as the conditions change, getting better, getting worse, again, packet loss is something that happens. Secondly, looking at these network conditions, as we all know, as we walk through the world, as we drive down the street, as anything happens, also our network conditions are constantly changing in the real world. So things like your specific device. Again, I have 3 mobile devices right here in my office right now. My different carriers, the different regions. Again, I'm traveling, so I may be East Coast U.S., then I might be on the West Coast U.S. That is going to significantly change or impact the carrier that I'm on. It's also going to change what my conditions are like. And then specifically that location, again, there's any parts of a city, if you go to a baseball stadium, or as we all know, if we're in a large conference, again, your network connectivity is significantly impacted and changing. So thinking network virtualization, how is it that we can then not only discover these, capture these conditions, but then also be able to recreate those network conditions and ultimately be able to do this in a pre-production lab? As Giddy had mentioned, looking at things like, shorter ALM cycle, continuous QA, again, being able to introduce these network conditions into your specific lab so that you can now get those results faster. So I'm going to get through a few slides here very quickly. Almost think of it as a demo. There's really 3 different ways that Shunra enables you to be able to capture these changing and variable network conditions and then recreate them in your lab. So I'm going to walk through each of those just to show you how easy this is to do. The first way is being able to capture with a Shunra product that we have called Network Catcher Express. In the upper left corner of the slide, you'll see that it's free. So if you go out to the App Store or if you go out to the Android market today and you just type in Network Catcher, this will come up. Again, it's a free download. You have it on your phone. You open it up and you run it. Now what I'm showing you is a 2.5G or an edge connection versus a 3G versus a Wi-Fi. And again, we're just going out to www.google.com and hitting that site and capturing these latency and loss conditions so that we could then understand from wherever we are on that type of network condition, these are what the results are going to be like. But ultimately being able to capture those to then recreate them. Once that test completes, you have the ability to then click email, and you can see all the results, all the varied parameters. So some of the bits that Giddy was talking about on the different carriers, on the different operating systems, on the different devices, what type of connection you have, specific date and time of when this was run, your latitude, longitude as well. All of that is in the email already. The other thing that you'll see here is an attachment called an NTX file. This is a unique Shunra protocol that allows us to be able to then import that later into a variety of different tools to recreate that specific network condition with 100% accuracy, again, all in your lab. The next way that we do this, or the second way, so the first one being Network Catcher Express, the second one is we have a Shunra network library. More specifically on the left, you can see that this is a Shunra Global Mobile and Broadband Network Library. Within this, there's over 15 million different points where we've captured that true last mile condition on a device with a specific carrier in a specific location. And location-wise, there's about 52,000 different cities around the world represented within this library. To be able to access it, you come in via one of our tools called Network Catcher, which is the screenshot in the middle. And you can see what I've done here is selected Philadelphia here in the United States, and I wanted to have a cellular 3G connection and going across all mobile devices with a typical latency condition, with a typical bandwidth condition, and I want to have the emulation running for only 1 minute. And as soon as I hit OK, what this will do is now provide me with, this is what that model looks like based on all the data that we've captured and these different and varied mobile conditions out in the real world. You can see how bandwidth is fairly flat, but a little bit of up and down. It's really the latency and loss where you see the significant variation over time. The simple thing within this tool is you can then click Export, and then you'll be able to replay that file. Again, it's another NTX file. The third way and last way that I wanted to show is within a product called VCAT. There's all these preset conditions, again, for the varied network types and then also the varied conditions within that type, all pre-built. And then to be able to recreate that condition in the lab, you can see what I did here is simply just import that Philly 3G typical, and then you click the play button, and you now have the ability to see within your lab how your applications will perform under those specific conditions with 100% accuracy. So I told you I was going to move fairly quick through those. I thought it was important to show you not only the capability, but also how simple it is to use, and 3 different ways that you have the ability to follow through on best practice number 2, which is, again, looking at that mobile network or networks and the variability within them. So next we're going to look at mobile load and performance. I know we've mentioned the single user performance when Giddy was going through. Again, you can typically see a lot of information from that and derive that as well. The first bullet here, being able to test these user scenarios on real devices in real networks, is one that we wanted to highlight. So again, thinking about the capabilities that HP brings around the mobile protocols, thinking about the capabilities that Perfective Mobile brings with real handsets on real devices in real networks, and then also Shunra's capability of being able to recreate these real-world conditions in your lab and provide you with performance results and automated remediation recommendations tailored specifically to mobile to support your continuous QA and your shorter ALM cycles. So as we think about mobile load and performance, we also want to look at the impact of the network on the user's experience, both from a functional and a performance perspective. The other part that many people are not thinking about just yet is what that impact of these multi-users are on the back-end infrastructure. And again, thinking about about the mobile pieces specifically. My next slide is going to show you a very simple graph that you could use to illustrate how this is going to significantly impacting your back-end infrastructure. Also looking at automated mobile optimization recommendations. Again, I just mentioned that. It's a core Shunner capability, is in the results that we deliver, providing you with immediate, actionable, and automated results that you could go back to your development team, or hopefully a development team paired with one of your testers to be able to make those fixes and ultimately deliver a higher performing application. The last one here, prior to production, tune the application and the infrastructure, mitigating your risk for failure. Again, another critical element that this is the real value that you're going to derive from being able to leverage these capabilities. This being the slide that I was referring to, showing the result of the impact of latency, or what many people refer to as delay in the network, which is going to be extending that server resource time on your existing infrastructure. So on the left-hand side, what you'll see is a high bandwidth, low latency scenario. Your typical, personal computer coming in over a high bandwidth condition. So maybe you're on, a FiOS, or again, it could be a very high broadband connection in an office or an enterprise location. But second or sub-second request to responses is what you're typically seeing. So again, request comes in, answer goes out. On the right-hand side is we start looking at these lower bandwidth or higher latency conditions. Could be a remote user that's on a 3G air card, could be a mobile user that's on an iPhone or an Android device. What happens now is we see how that latency or that lower bandwidth, or the combination of both of them, also looking at potentially packet loss, everything else that comes from that network condition now, is stretching out that server resource time. And again, in this example that we ran, it was greater than 13 seconds on average for that response time. And again, that was just due to these users that were being on mobile devices. And now, knowing this information and the back end, again, one of the best practices we wanted to highlight was leveraging your existing production monitoring tools in a pre-prod environment or prior to production environment to do back-end monitoring. There's a number of reasons why. Again, just build in this pre-production monitoring. Have that ability to now enable your capacity planning and sizing team to work directly with your performance engineers and know that on an average day, this is what it should look like. However, we're going to be running a promotion. This is what we're expecting to come up. Now you're going to see not only the end user performance experience from a functional perspective as well as from a performance perspective, but also now the impact on your back-end infrastructure as a result of your changing demographic of your end users. Another huge benefit that our customers have been able to recognize is being able to perform disaster recovery and resiliency tests. So what happens if this one component fails? Looking at it from a mobile functional as well as a mobile performance, let's try it. Let's run the test. Again, all this being done in a lab that has the accuracy of your existing production environment, but not needing to have 70 people come in over a holiday weekend and run these tests. You now have the ability to model that prior to production environment out to look like your production environment from a network, and then leveraging the capabilities from Perfecto and HP to do not only your back-end monitoring, but now also bringing real devices on real networks into that same exact model. Again, now being able to deliver higher performing and functioning apps, as well as tuning your back-end infrastructure for any upcoming events from a capacity planning, sizing, DR, resiliency. Pretty significant considerations here around best practice number 4. So given that we are talking about HP, I wanted to show you one of the screenshots that I had taken from a load runner controller. And again, I was executing a scenario. What you'll see in the upper left-hand corner is I had 500 virtual users that represented just all local, high bandwidth, low latency connections. So again, if we go back to looking at the impact of mobile latency on your infrastructure, this would be the chart on the left-hand side where things were roughly just under a second in response times. Then what we did with this scenario is we started introducing mobile users, and again, this was leveraging not only HP's capabilities but also Shoner's capabilities to emulate these mobile users. What got to be very interesting in the results, and what you can see here, is that actually less than 2% of the total virtual user population, or 9 mobile users versus 500 as regular users, actually moved everybody's transaction response time from what was about a second or under to now going over 5 seconds. So again, this is the impact of the real-world mobile users on transaction response time as it relates to your end users. And again, you can now pull up your back-end monitoring and say, oh, okay, what happened from a JVM perspective? What happened from a garbage collection? Where is it that these impacts are starting to back up on my infrastructure? And now being able to tune that hardware all prior to production. John, I'm going to hand it over to you for best practice number 5, if you don't mind.
Cool. Thanks, Todd. Can we go to the next slide? And so, as I think about best practices, one of the best practices would be, mobile is not magic. Mobile is not technology that requires you to reinvent everything that you do. It's faster. There are some things about mobile that you have to take into account. But the reality is does not require and should not require a QA or a development team to have to throw away the things that they've done in the past. Rather, it's really optimum to build upon your tools and your skills and your experience that you have and to apply them to mobile. Lots of organizations have made investments in developing skills and abilities to manage their application lifecycle. They've made investments in training their teams and implementing processes of reviews and QA to check each other's work. And they have an approach. They just have to move faster. They have to adopt an approach that can go faster, more agile, more nimble. In order to speed things up, they have to be much more closely aligned with the operation side, so that way when they do start to have issues with an application in production, they can quickly bring those issues back into the burn down list, and the release that goes out in 2 weeks can actually address a problem that people experience today. And so really the best practice, as I summarize this, as I think about this, is build upon your strengths and extend to mobile, which is really, I think, what one of the core messages we've been trying to deliver around this. And it's about eventually getting to enterprise mobility and thinking about the whole life cycle, which we can talk about that perhaps in another webinar or another session. But at this point, I want to kind of keep moving and talk about at least the solution the way we see it. And so let's go to the next slide. So at a really high level, this is the solution that we've been seeing mobile evolving towards. And it starts with functional testing. And we've have thousands of people, tens of thousands of people, probably more than that, who have great skills using Quick Test Professional and unified functional testing. And so one of the things that we've seen happen, has happened over the last couple of years, is we've had partners, an ecosystem of partners developing solutions. And Perfecto Mobile solution is we highlight because it brings both mobile devices in the cloud, so you don't have to own the device. You can connect it fairly easily to Perfecto Mobile, and all of a sudden you're able to automate scripts on multiple mobile devices, and you're able to drive tests on these mobile devices to ensure that your application will perform, will operate and function as desired. And the kind of coming down the left side of this thing, the next step really is to look at performance. And we've been in the performance testing business for a long time. And again, there are lots of people who have skills developing mobile scripts using VUGen and LoadRunner or Performance Center. And so we've extended LoadRunner Performance Center with mobile protocols that enable LoadRunner or Performance Center to develop mobile scripts and to develop the mobile transactions. And with Shunra, who's been integrated into LoadRunner Performance Center for a very long time, now you're able to adjust and create a variable network conditions in order to have real-world performance testing of an application to really drive the infrastructure to experience mobile traffic in a real way. And then when you put the two together, right, and when you run mobile performance testing and functional testing together, you're really able now to see which you're able to do with the GUI protocols. You're able to run it all, have a load test run and run a test through QTP. You're able to see now real performance from the end user's perspective. You're able to see a complete picture of how will this application perform when it's under load and when a user's accessing it. So this is what the vision that we're building towards, that we're working off of around how this comes together. Let's go to the next slide and look at some of the detailed pieces. And Giddy and Todd, feel free to jump in and talk about this. This is a little more detailed than we had in the last slide, but we were showing how we can do automated functional testing with Perfecto Mobile and QTP. All of that connecting, using Shunra to emulate the network and to give us realistic network conditions. We're also, for performance and load testing with, hundreds or thousands or more virtual users, either using, Mobile True Client to generate web traffic for mobile websites, or the mobile apps protocol to generate traffic as if it's coming from a native application. Again, Shunra giving us this rich capability to emulate network and network conditions depending upon what you want to see. Shunra's network catcher also gives you the ability to not have to go out and guess what the network conditions are, not go out and measure the network conditions, but you can actually leverage their library of network conditions that they've already measured in the mobile space. They have, Todd, what's the size of the database of how many different entries you guys have?
There's 15 million different points from over 52,000 different cities around the world.
So, which is awesome. I mean, that gives you that's a head start. You don't have to go out and guess what the network conditions would be. You can actually take realistic network conditions and interject that into shaping the tests. And then evaluate the performance and evaluate the results, and then repeat this until you're confident that your application will perform and will function as designed. So, and I think that the other power of this solution, really, as I see it, as I think about it, is the flexibility of having a wide number of possible devices to test against. I mean, I used to lead a testing organization before I went to HP, and building and maintaining the test lab was a challenge, and this was really before mobile was a big deal. I shudder when I think about having to have a filing cabinet full of phones that I have to maintain service plans on, that I have to use for functional testing. So Giddy, on the Perfecto solution, tell me how many devices are roughly, how many different devices are available in the public cloud?
Well, first of all, it's important. We didn't say that before, so it's important to know that there are the two clouds. We have the public cloud and we have the private cloud. Where the public cloud has a shared. John, can you hear me okay?
I can. A little echo. I'm going to mute myself.
Yeah, I kind of hear myself as well. Well, the public cloud hosts hundreds of devices. We always change them, keeping the most popular 100 devices representing all platforms and geographies and real networks available online at all times. A lot of most of the enterprises working with the Perfecto HP solution, they implement their own secure private cloud with all of the reference devices that they choose put in the system and test on. They usually take the public cloud as well as a complementary solution in order to have accessibility to all these hundreds of devices, even if just for the looking good kind of testing. For example, the iPhone 5 is going to hit the market. That means that in one day, millions of users are going to have this device, never tested on probably. So we're going to have it there as soon as possible, probably on the first week or even before that. Sometimes it's pre-launch, and that way you can actually access the device and test your application or website and see that it's at least reasonable, that there isn't any crisis that you need to address now. So to summarize, you have your own private cloud with your core devices, completely under your control. Nobody shares these devices. And also access to a public cloud with access to a very, very large, dynamic variety, of devices in different geographies around the world.
Cool. Thanks, Gidi. I'm unmuted again, so I can talk again. But so this is a picture. I mean, this is a picture, I guess, of how to achieve that end-to-end solution for mobile. And so hopefully this will help as you look at and think about your mobile solutions. This is one answer that will help to get there, and I'm pretty excited about it based upon all the things I've seen, both in the mobile market in Barcelona with the things that are coming, and what I've seen talking and learned from talking to customers and in my own background. This is a pretty exciting story. Let's go to the next slide, and we'll try to work to wrap up. Watching the clock, we've got about 8 minutes left, so I've got a couple of wrap-up slides we can talk through kind of quickly. I don't want to spend a lot of time on these. We've got a few. I've answered some questions in the chat room, and we'll touch on those, and we'll also see if there's any other questions. So if you have questions, please put them into the question tool. At a really high level, it's about having a process and approach to integrate and to do testing early. It's about taking ALM and extending it throughout the life cycle. Being able to use ALM to have traceability from code, from your requirements to your code to your testing. If you have ALM, if you've implemented ALM and application lifecycle intelligence, then you really have the ability to now trace your test case all the way back to what code was changed, and you can then look at your testing from a perspective of how do I have coverage of the code and have confidence that you have code coverage as well. You've got to really think about not functional or performance, but it's and, right? This is a case of and. Functional by itself is fine, but it doesn't tell you the whole story. You really got to bring them together. I don't want to read these to you on the webinar. Are there others that Gidi or Todd that you'd point out as being key?
Yeah, I guess, John, I just had actually it's not even on the slide, which sometimes I guess maybe those are the best thoughts, but I know that as John, you and I and Gidi have been out talking to people, there's really 4 different pillars that customers are thinking about, and one is the functional piece, which we've spent a lot of time on, the other performance, which we spent a lot of time on, another one being security. And we haven't touched on that too much here, but the last one is also operations. And when I was listening to Gidi talking through, the idea of a private cloud for many enterprise organizations, but then also how they're leveraging the public cloud for these other devices. And again, much like John came from an organization where he was in an enterprise, I did the same about 1.5 years ago. And that was a huge benefit to my operations team, because now when a customer would call in and say, I'm on this type of device in this geography, and this is what my experience is, we would want to be able to recreate that exact experience of that customer. So, one of the ways, to avoid this failure is keying off of what Gidi was going into, and, leveraging, a private cloud for the main devices that you want to test for, but then also having your operations team be able to have access to a public cloud, and being able to leverage HP and Shunra, in addition to Perfecto, to be able to recreate that exact experience, so that hopefully you can recreate the incident that customer had, ultimately fixing it and deploying it. But again, that was just one example, John, that I wanted to add here.
Great, cool. Well, we've got 5 minutes left. Let's go to the next slide, just so we can quick review. You know, mobile is going really, really fast, and you've got to have a strategy to solve for it. You know, in our session today, we've discussed what we think are some of the best practices that will help you to be successful testing and delivering mobile applications, and so hopefully that helps. I want to spend some time on Q&A so we can wrap up and cover that. We had a couple of questions that came through that I want to come back to, and I answered them in the chat, but I'd like to at least see if the other panelists want to touch on them as well. You know, Todd, one of the questions that came up was, what is network virtualization? You know, I answered this, and I answered it to everyone. It said it means emulating different network conditions when you're doing your testing. You know, typically the test lab has great network conditions. So you want to thoughts about network virtualization, Todd?
Yeah, absolutely. So again, Jen, I'm just reading through your response now, but you know, the idea being in your typical lab, you're going to have, you know, maybe a gigabit connection, maybe a 100 meg connection, and we all know that, you know, whether you're, you know, in a typical distributed model, which again, with the applications, you know, the composite apps that we all deal with today, often are highly distributed and dependent across all these varied networks. So the idea is, how is it that you can bring that network into your lab? And again, from what we've been observing, roughly 70% of the time from a performance perspective is being spent on the network. So again, if you're not considering the network in the testing that you're doing, the results that you're getting back are going to be inaccurate. And from what my experience was previous to working at Chandra and working in enterprises, within enterprise IT, again, it was a big false positive prior to rolling out, and where we would have to try to figure out why things were happening the way they were. But again, network virtualization being a critical component of how is it that you can recreate those network conditions or virtualize them within your lab.
Great, thanks, Todd. Hey, I got another question that came in, and it was about reusing test automation. But are there obstacles with the form factors of all the different devices? You know, you think about the tablets, the different screen sizes. You know, I even think of some of the different form factors of having, you know, Todd, you've got one of those tablets that plugs into a keyboard, which is way too cool. Giddy, what's your perspective on automation across multiple platforms?
Well, first of all, it's a good point to emphasize during these questions. It's essential. It's essential, and every single enterprise we work with, and we work with a lot of the big banks, a lot of the big retailers, and even small mobile developers, this always comes up. Practicing automation across devices is something that you need to consider from day one. We have another webinar on that. We give that every now and then. We have an approach called the Triple M, trying to advise customers how many devices, platforms they need to automate on, to test on throughout the application lifecycle. To make a long story short, to simplify it, we recommend having a core group of reference devices, say 6, 7 devices, representing the main platforms, say 2 Androids, an iPad, an Android-based tablet, a BlackBerry, a Windows phone, and iPhone, of course, and use them for your as your reference devices for the core automation. Then we have another group of devices, we call them the major devices, on which they are like 10 or 15 devices, where you expand your variety a little in order to execute a larger portion of your regression and interoperability testing. So these are the 2 main groups. But going back to the question, you need to automate on various platforms. The way we do that, we use OCR for text and image recognition, so we actually analyze the screen. So if you build a test case on the iPhone, for example, let's say, go to the PayPal application, find the logo, click it, open the application, go to my account, and log out. Simple script. Then you want to replicate that script to an Android device. So you'll need to modify it a little bit in order to capture the different logo, because the application logo would be different on the iPhone screen and the Android screen. But apart from that, the flow is going to be pretty much the same, given the application is pretty much the same. So based on this screen analysis, we can actually be device agnostic, and with very slight modifications that mainly have to do with slightly different flows between the platforms and different images, we have the ability to take one script that you worked on and execute it on the different devices. But again, it's a key essential thing that you need to consider from day one. When you start building your mobile testing, mobile quality project, you need to consider automating from day one, and consider taking a service partner in order to help you ramp that up quicker, or if you have a strong enough automation team, you can keep it in-house. But do it big and do it from day one.
Well, Giddy, thank you very much. You know, there's a couple of questions we're going to get to, and we'll get them to them offline that we can't get to in the webinar because we've hit our time limit. And I really have to say, first off, on behalf of the panel of Todd and Giddy and myself, thank you very much for joining us and joining the session. Please join the Vivit Mobile SIG. We'd love to communicate and interact with you there. Are there any other closing comments that we need to have, Giddy or Todd?
Well, on my behalf, first of all, thanks both of you and all of you again. I second John. Please join the Mobile SIG. We're just ramping it up, and it's a great platform to exchange experiences and information between us. Mobile is already here, and it's already business critical, and it already involves a lot of transactions and risks, and you need to start considering it. As John said before, mobile testing is software testing extended with other stuff that did not exist before. The main message I take from this is do not reinvent the wheel. Do not deploy a completely new process. Find a way to extend what you currently have, your software testing knowledge, team, tools, licenses, and extend that to mobile. That would be the quickest ramp up, the shortest learning curve, and minimize your risk and time to market. That's the way to go.
Well, thank you everybody for your participation today in the webinar sponsored by Vivit. And again, this is Todd DiCapua. I just ask that if you can go out and join the SIG, it would be great. The other reason being is we're going to look to schedule more of these types of webinars in the near future, trying to do one per quarter, and would love to hear what topics you'd be interested in learning more about as well. Again, thank you all for your participation today, and look forward to speaking with you again soon. Bye.
Thank you very much.